I'm out here in my Austin, Texas garden this morning. It's starting to get pretty balmy, but I had some cucumber care and maintenance tips that I wanted to convey to you. As I was doing my work, I started to get inspired and I wanted to share these thoughts. They may benefit you. It may be something that you've been searching for, but I want to talk about, should you prune your cucumber plants? What should you do if they need a little bit of maintenance throughout the season? And here I am, I've got the plants behind me, 7 varieties of cucumber melons, which are different than cucumbers. They're a different species. They're also not the little cucamelons that you might be thinking of. I also have some Suyo Long heirloom cucumbers, proper cucumbers. And these behind me, they've been planted in March from seed. So they've been growing for a while. Now we're into mid-June. And as they've grown, they've needed a little bit of work. What I mean by that is, as the plants begin to grow up the trellis, what you'll notice is that you'll get some shading of the lower leaves, and that causes them to turn yellow and they'll start to die off. Essentially, they're not getting enough sunlight, but also those leaves will age out over time. I often equate this to our skin cells. You know, they have a limited lifespan and they'll fall off eventually. I know that's kind of weird to think of, but not all leaves are going to be on these plants forever, and it can be okay in some specific instances to prune them out and remove them. Now, I'm thinking in my head of this TikTok creator. I think it's like Growing in Berlin or Berlin Gardening. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact account, but one of the things they say is leave it the F alone. Now, this is a channel that's focused on houseplants by and large, but I think there's some of that logic that can apply in the vegetable garden, because leaving things alone has advantages, because if you're like me, you can overdo it pretty easily. And so I just want to throw that in there because you have to balance as you do this work. If you're new to the channel, I'm Scott from New Garden Road, always out here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Encouraging biodiversity and restoring habitat is my mission, one garden at a time. One of the key advantages of pruning your cucumber plants is that it gives you the capacity to inspect for pests and disease throughout the season. You really get your hands a little bit deeper into the plants. You make that connection. You learn to identify what's abnormal. And I think it's important not to fly off the handle when you see something. Make sure you know what it is. You don't want to eradicate accidentally any beneficial insects. What I'm seeing this time of year is not really alarming to me in terms of insects. Leaf-footed bugs have come out in pretty large numbers here in the past few days, and I've been physically removing them. They're plant suckers, and so they have a proboscis. They'll stick into the cucumber fruit and suck some of the juices out. So I think they're fairly easy to remediate, but if you train your eye to the insects, the nymphs, the eggs, then you can pretty quickly get a grasp on their population. Another one that I saw this morning was a buffalo tree hopper. That's another plant sucker. Not a big issue in my experience, but I will say a lot of these insects can become, vectors for disease. They can transmit, diseases from plant to plant. So you have to keep an eye on that. Nonetheless, you get your hands on the plants, it gives you an opportunity to understand better and more clearly what's going on. And you also have an opportunity to cut it off at the pass before it becomes a bigger issue. When it comes to aphids, I'm not really concerned about them ultimately. This may be a surprise to some of you watching, but the fact of the matter is, aphids, in my view, are the baseline of the food chain for the higher order of beneficial insects, specifically predatory insects. They are like the fast food of the garden for these allies that we need here. So if we don't have them, we have less of a draw for the beneficial insects. And in the urban garden, we need more of a balance because we have, by and large, higher populations of these pest insects. That is the way it goes when you eradicate an ecosystem and you start pumping nitrogen into your lawn and your landscape to make it look good. You'll be feeding these herbivorous insects, which are going to be pests in your vegetable garden. But when you manifest a biodiverse habitat full of native plantings, annuals, and other herbaceous plants that will flower throughout the season, you'll be creating an environment, an ecosystem for these beneficial insects to inhabit, and they will also find some food and help you out in your garden practice. So that's just a little philosophy in there. Take it or leave it. If you want to do something about the aphids, by all means, be free. But in my opinion, aphids are an indicator of plant stress, and if you give beneficial insects a chance to come in and help strike a balance, and you support the plant's general wellness, then oftentimes you'll come out really well. It doesn't always work out like that, but I can tell you numerous times I've seen the aphids come along on the underside of the leaves of the cucumber plants, and immediately I saw beneficial insects like lady beetles, green lacewings, parasitoid wasp. I mean, there are so many things out here that will feast on aphids. So I realized I went on an aphid tangent, but it's one of the things that you'll find if you're providing some regular attention and focus to your plants. Now, in following that philosophy of less is more, or leave it the F alone, I think it's good to focus on the lower 18 to 24 inches of these plants. That will help to generate some good airflow, which can help to stave off things like powdery mildew and other fungal diseases. You really want that to be breathing underneath the plants. As they begin to grow up the trellis, they naturally have some pretty good airflow, but lower down, it just needs a little bit more breathing space. In addition to that, I mentioned the plants will begin to grow and shade out those lower leaves. The first leaves will then die off because they age out. You'll get some brown, yellow leaves down there, and those just kind of create a habitat for decay. And in the growing season, we want to maintain a good order with that. So this is part hygiene. Another great point for enacting this practice is that you will generate better visibility for harvesting. I mentioned cucumber melons, which I'm in love with. Here's a couple. These may not be familiar to you. They're actually immature melons. I'm gonna create a whole video I've been documenting over the season, and they are super tasty. They last better in the heat. They don't get bitter. There's multiple varieties that you can choose from. They all have a unique story. These are both, I believe, southern Italian varieties, grow in warm regions for a long time. And they go back to different countries like Tunisia and probably Africa, India. This is the striped Caracello Lassesi. Super juicy, sweet, but it tastes like a cucumber ultimately, really crispy. This one I can't even pronounce the name, but it's great. I love them all. When I prune out some of these leaves, it not only gets me in tune with what could be there as a problem, but what's there as a good thing, meaning the fruit that I want to grow and eat. So this morning, as I spent some time cleaning these plants up, I just saw a lot more fruit than I was even aware of. And once you see it, you have, that pattern recognition of being able to the next day come back and say, okay, it's a little bit bigger. Is it ready? Boom. And then you've got your food. I really enjoy getting out in the garden for at least a half an hour each morning. And if you do this early in the day, you'll really get a good opportunity to gain insight into the pulse of what you're growing. Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel, like this video, and follow New Garden Road for weekly content. You can grow your own cucumbers. Keep it organic.